Good evening. India has approved the first list of 13 countries that includes the United States of America and 5 of its neighboring countries, Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan, Maldives and Bangladesh, for exports of hydroxychloroquine. The government is working on 2 more such lists of countries to which it will be exporting the drugs later. World leaders have been thanking Prime Minister Narendra Modi for allowing the exports of this drug. Our in focus tonight is humanity at the core of India's COVID-19 diplomacy. Also on the show tonight, India's response to COVID-19 is keeping pace with the evolving situation. So our second talking point tonight is COVID-19, India response to an evolving crisis. All that and more in this edition of News Night. I'm Prasar. Let's get started with the headlines. On COVID-19, Health Ministry assures there is no community transmission in the country, says awareness and alertness are must. Number of active coronavirus cases in India go up to 6,039 with 206 deaths, 515 people discharged after successful treatment. Union Home Ministry directs all states and union territories to ensure strict compliance of lockdown measures and not allow any social or religious gatherings or processions in view of the upcoming festive season. Asks them to keep a check on social media. Centre says India has enough stock of hydroxychloroquine and will release surplus quantities of the drug for exports only after keeping a sufficient buffer for its own requirements, assures there is no dearth of N95 masks and PPE for domestic requirements. PMO reviews efforts of 11 empowered groups to tackle COVID-19. The meeting stresses on confidence-building measures to ensure seamless supply chain management and communication to people on COVID-19 in regional languages. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks to his counterparts in Japan and Nepal on the prevailing situation due to COVID-19. PM also discusses the situation arising due to COVID-19 with Brazilian President and Israeli Prime Minister, underlines India's commitment to contribute to humanity's fight against the pandemic. Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan interacts with state health ministers, reviews the situation arising due to COVID-19, says 4,100 crore rupees have been released to states. State governments pledge and utilize resources in the fight against COVID-19. UP government gives 1,000 rupees each to 11 lakh construction workers. In Delhi, active cases stand at over 800. Door-to-door medical screening being undertaken in hotspots. Punjab government extends curfew in the state till the 1st of May and lawmakers in Madhya Pradesh to take a 30% salary cut for 1 year. COVID-19 claims more than 97,000 lives across the globe with more than 16 lakh active cases. Rising cases continue to be recorded in the United States, Spain and Italy. And here are now the latest details on India's response to COVID-19. India is battling COVID-19 and here's what the government is saying it is doing. There's no community transmission of COVID-19 in the country till now. So government has ruled out any baseless reports that there were community transmission cases in India. There is no community transmission, says the government. Over 16,000 people were tested on Thursday. Only 2% tested positive. This should be good news. What does this mean? We'll further discuss with our guests on what really this means as far as infection rate is concerned. Health Ministry has told states that be alert, follows do's and don'ts. So there is really no room for complacency as such. There are 146 government labs testing samples for COVID-19. 67 private labs have been given the approval. So in all, there are more than 200 labs, both in the public sector and in the private sector. Compare this to the situation in January when there was just one government lab doing that. India has enough stock of hydroxychloroquine. This is a repeated assertion being made by the government of India that do not worry with regard to domestic stocks of hydroxychloroquine, even if exports are to take place. India is releasing surplus for export only after keeping sufficient buffer. So India will be meeting all contingencies as far as the need for hydroxychloroquine within the country is concerned, and only then the surplus will be exported by India. We'll tell you the numbers as well later. India has a stock of 3.28 crore hydroxychloroquine tablets. So this is the current stock that India has as of now. 3.28 crore tablets India has of this drug. India is projected to require 1.6 crore tablets for domestic use by the end of this month. So what we have is 3.28 crore. What we require till month end is 1.6 crore. India's stock of hydroxychloroquine drug is 3 times what it needs for domestic use. So India has 3 times what it requires for domestic use. Besides that, there is no dearth of N95 masks or PPEs for domestic requirements. Remember, government is giving approvals for manufacturing of PPEs, etc. within the country, and that is why those supplies are actually keeping pace with demand. Over 20,000 foreign nationals have been evacuated from India as of Thursday. This has happened as a result of requests of various foreign governments. So over 20,000 foreign nationals have already been evacuated by India. Besides that, enforcement of lockdown is happening across the country. Well, this is a repeated assertion that the centre is making to states to ensure that lockdown measures are effectively implemented, and that's what the state governments are doing. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued a fresh advisory to states. What does that advisory say? It says that maintain appropriate vigil on social media in light of the upcoming festive season. Besides that, 37,978 relief camps and shelters have been set up across the country. This is the overall data as far as the entire length and breadth of India is concerned. And this is the breakup that you have in front of you. 34,000 relief camps set up by state governments and 3,900 camps by NGOs. So these relief camps have been set up for migrant labor. Over 14.3 lakh stranded migrant workers being provided relief in those relief camps. We'll tell you about the relief camps in terms of the food that is being supplied as well. 26,225 food camps have been set up in the country as well to ensure that people don't run out of food. People who are underprivileged, they don't run out of food. Over 1 crore people have been provided food so far. Besides that, the NHRC has told the centre, and that's the next slab that you'll see. This one is that over 1 crore people have been supplied food samples. Besides that, NHRC has told the centre that ensure mentally ill people don't become easy carriers. So this is a communication that the NHRC has made to states that ensure that mentally ill people do not wittingly or unwittingly become carriers of coronavirus. Well, in view of the ensuing festivals in the month of April, Union Ministry of Home Affairs has directed all states and union territories to ensure strict compliance of lockdown measures to fight COVID-19. So that communication has been made, and they've also been told to not allow any social or religious gatherings or processions in view of the upcoming festive season. This has been communicated to district authorities and field agencies as well. And besides that, appropriate vigil on social media should also be maintained against circulation of any objectionable content. So this is part of the advisory that the centre has issued to states. Seek attention of public authorities, social religious organizations and citizens as well, so that this is a participatory effort. Ensure strict compliance of the lockdown. So this is a fresh advisory that the centre has issued to states. Besides that, as India extends a helping hand to international community by allowing the export of hydroxychloroquine being used as a preventive drug and for treatment of COVID-19, the Indian leadership has won praise from world leaders. US President Donald Trump, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for India's humanitarian gesture in these testing times. Meanwhile, on India's decision to allow exports of hydroxychloroquine, the Ministry of External Affairs has said that there is adequate stock available in India for domestic use and contingencies, implying there is really no need to worry about any scarcity of the drug in India.
It was another day marked by gratitude for India's global and humanitarian approach towards tackling COVID-19. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his decision to supply hydroxychloroquine. He wrote, "Thank you, my dear friend Narendra Modi, for sending hydroxychloroquine to Israel." A tweet from the office of the Prime Minister of Israel read, "All the citizens of Israel thank you." Replying to him, Prime Minister Modi said, We have to jointly fight this pandemic. India is ready to do whatever is possible to help our friends. Praying for the well-being and good health of the people of Israel, Netanyahu. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke to his Nepalese counterpart KP Sharma Oli and discussed the prevailing situation due to COVID-19 crisis. Prime Minister Modi tweeted, "Spoke today with Prime Minister of Nepal, Shri KP Sharma Oli. We discussed the prevailing situation due to COVID-19. I appreciate the determination of people of Nepal to fight this challenge. We stand in solidarity with Nepal in our common fight against COVID-19. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also held a discussion over coronavirus with his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe and said India-Japan Special Strategic Partnership can develop new technologies for the post-COVID-19 world. Prime Minister Modi tweeted, "Had a fruitful discussion with my friend Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe about COVID-19. India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership can help develop new technologies and solutions for the post-COVID world, for our peoples, for the Indo-Pacific region, and for the world." Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro also thanked Prime Minister Modi for supplying raw materials to continue production of hydroxychloroquine to treat patients of COVID-19. In reply, PM Modi tweeted, "Thank you, President Jair Bolsonaro. The India-Brazil partnership is stronger than ever in these challenging times. India is committed to contribute to humanity's fight against this pandemic." Hours after US President Donald Trump thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for sending hydroxychloroquine to the US in times of need. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, "Times like these bring friends closer." In a tweet in response to Trump's note of thanks, Prime Minister Modi said, "Fully agree with you, President Donald Trump. Times like these bring friends closer. The India-US partnership is stronger than ever. India shall do everything possible to help humanity's fight against COVID-19. We shall win this together." Earlier, Donald Trump said, "Extraordinary times require even closer cooperation between friends. Thank you, India and the Indian people, for the decision on HCQ. Will not be forgotten. Thank you, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for your strong leadership in helping not just India but humanity in this fight." The Ministry of External Affairs clarified that in view of the requests made by several countries for hydroxychloroquine, India reviewed its domestic stocks and buffer requirements for the drug, and a decision was taken to export surplus quantities. It also informed that the Indian government has approved the first list of countries to whom the drug would be supplied, while assuring that India has adequate stock to meet all contingencies.
Several countries have made requests for this particular item, and taking into view the domestic necessities and requirements, the domestic stock availability, and keeping a sufficient buffer for our own requirement, a decision was taken by the group of ministers to release some of the medicine, surplus medicine, for export purposes. The domestic requirement and necessity will be a priority for the government.
Meanwhile, after Pakistan pledged to donate $3 million to the SAARC COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund, India highlighted the early commitment made by some member countries and said that the degree of seriousness of each nation can be gauged by its behavior. In response to queries on Pakistan pledging its contribution, the Indian government spokesperson Anurag Srivastav stated, "It is for each SAARC member state to decide on the timing, manner and implementation of their SAARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund commitments. Where India is concerned, the commitment made by the Prime Minister is today in an advanced stage of implementation. Assistance in material and services has been extended to Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal and Sri Lanka. These SAARC countries have also made early commitment to the fund. The degree of seriousness of each nation can be gauged by their behavior. India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been championing the cause of regional and global cooperation to combat COVID-19. On March 15, Prime Minister Modi interacted with leaders of SAARC countries through video conference to chart out a common strategy to combat COVID-19 in the region, where he proposed the emergency fund based on voluntary contributions from all countries, with India making an initial offer of $10 million for the fund. On the 26th of March, the Prime Minister took part in an extraordinary virtual G20 Leaders Summit convened to forge a global coordinated response to COVID-19, where the PM called on leaders to help usher in a new globalization for the collective well-being of humankind and have multilateral fora focus on promoting the shared interests of humanity. India is thus playing a pivotal role in the Committee of Nations to fight COVID-19 through initiative, ideation and supply of essential medical supplies to the severely affected countries and those neighboring countries that are dependent on India's capabilities. With inputs from Abhishek Jha in Delhi, Bureau Report, DD India.
And that brings us to our In Focus tonight, which is humanity at the core of India's COVID-19 diplomacy. To discuss that, we have with us Ambassador Mohan Kumar. He's former Indian ambassador to France and also vice chairman with RIS for developing countries. I welcome you, Ambassador Kumar, to News Night, joining us now virtually. Ambassador, how do you look at the way world leaders are thanking Prime Minister Narendra Modi for having decided that India will be exporting hydroxychloroquine to various countries? For now, we know that India has given its approval to the first list, which has 13 countries in it, including the United States and 5 neighboring countries.
So I think it's a diplomatic masterstroke based largely on our philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. But more importantly, if India can, out of this crisis, emerge as a net public health security provider. Let me repeat it. If India can emerge as a net public health security provider, that would be an enormous achievement from a diplomatic point of view at a time when every country has decided to build a wall and go its own way. So it is as if India is the only country at this time which has said there needs to be cooperation between countries, among countries, to tackle this scourge jointly. So I do believe it's an extremely important step. It is it's tremendous. There's a tremendous irony that people have food stocks for food security. They have petroleum reserves for energy security. And yet, even the richest countries don't have pharmaceutical products for public health security. And in my view, this is going to be the most important lesson from this crisis. Public health will now be on par with energy security, food security, and national security.
Well, one prong of India's diplomacy in this fight against COVID-19 has been the decision to allow export of hydroxychloroquine, which is in high demand worldwide. The other prong was evacuation of nationals of other countries that India did. There was no compulsion for India to do it. It did it out of choice. It's not the first time that India has done that. India has done that in the past as well. Does this reflect India's approach in terms of keeping humanity at the center stage during times of crisis?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right in pointing out the evacuation aspect of it, which happened a little bit earlier, in fact, at the height of the crisis. I think countries don't forget the behavior of other countries during a crisis. I don't want to name names because I'm a diplomat, but you know exactly what I have in mind when I say that if countries can act selflessly during a crisis like this, then those countries tend to be noticed. And I think I dare say that India has really come out on top, not just, as you rightly say, in the matter of evacuation, but especially in the area of the HCQ drug and the paracetamol drug. And in my view, if we can look at the future and look at active pharmaceutical ingredients which can be produced in India, rather than we relying on imports from other countries, then I think India can become a reliable supplier of these life-saving drugs. So I do believe, as you rightly say, this has been a diplomatic coup, whichever way you look at it.
Ambassador Kumar, how do you look at India's leadership at the regional level? Because India was among the very few countries the world over that actually thought about the region and thought globally. On the 15th of March, India convened a video conference with all the SAARC leaders, and a number of suggestions were made there. And India emphasized on a common strategy for all the SAARC countries.
The regional initiative, frankly, has taken me by surprise because nothing prevented Prime Minister Modi from taking an initiative in the context of BIMSTEC, in the context of, let's say, other Indian Ocean Rim Association. We could have done that. The fact that Prime Minister Modi chose to look at SAARC essentially sends out two important signals. One, no matter what differences that India may have with a key country, a member of SAARC, our neighboring country to the west, we are happy and willing to set it aside and look at South Asia as one construct, regional construct. Secondly, we are in this together. And if you cannot bother about the well-being of your neighbors, who else is going to do it? So I find it extremely interesting and far-sighted and based a lot on wisdom that Prime Minister Modi chose to use SAARC. Because as I say, from a diplomatic perspective, it would have been far easier to focus on BIMSTEC or IORA. He still chose to use SAARC as a forum, and we all know that SAARC has been moribund, to put it diplomatically. So I again see an extremely far-sighted philosophy behind this initiative by Prime Minister Modi.
Ambassador Kumar, Prime Minister did not limit himself to SAARC. He further expanded his worldview at this point in time to include the G20 as well. And he did focus in that video conference that he held with various G20 countries that it is these G20 countries that are taking the maximum burden as far as this pandemic is concerned, because 80 to 90% of the positive cases worldwide are in these G20 countries. 80 to 90% of deaths worldwide are in these G20 countries. He spoke about a new globalization that should have at its core well-being of humanity. Again, would you say that this is yet another manifestation of India's approach to these testing times?
Oh, absolutely. I also think, at the risk of being politically incorrect, I would also have to say the United Nations and especially the UN Security Council has not covered itself with glory. This has certainly not been the finest hour for the UN Security Council. So Prime Minister Modi making those two solid points that you just outlined at the G20. One, that we need a different kind of globalization. And when he said that, he didn't spell it out. And now I'm going to interpret it, if you allow me. What he means is, let's put material wealth aside and look at the well-being of humans. At the end of the day, the human being should be the center, and it should be the heart of globalization. So that's the first point. The second point, which he spelled out quite honestly at the G20 meeting, was he's openly asked for a reform of the WHO, the World Health Organization. He said it is, well, he didn't say it, but again, I'm interpreting it for you. It's a 19th century or a 20th century organization which is supremely unsuited for the 21st century. So he said we should also have a reform of the WHO, the World Health Organization. And if you saw what happened at the UN Security Council meeting today, I think Prime Minister Modi cannot be faulted. Indeed, he should be congratulated for saying G20 should be driving this effort rather than any other forum. So once again, I think the Prime Minister has enormously good instincts when it comes to international diplomacy. And a couple of points that he made at the G20 meeting, I thought was spot on.
And when a question was asked today to the Indian government spokesperson on a belated contribution of $3 million US by Pakistan to the SAARC Emergency Response Fund, he stated that the degree of seriousness of each nation can be gauged by their behavior. What do you make of that?
So I think, look, this is not really the time to make any statement that could be interpreted by anybody as representing pettiness. I thought the explanation provided by Pakistan was far from convincing, that they didn't participate because the SAARC Secretariat was not there. You're looking at a country like India, which is going out of its way to contribute to the fight against coronavirus in countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and not to mention United States and Israel, frankly. We haven't even talked about that. So for somebody to say we will not do this because the SAARC Secretariat is not there, I really am happy that the government of India has not reacted to this. It shouldn't, because you don't have to dignify the reaction by, dignify the comment by a response. It is really not worthy of response. This is a collective fight. This is a collective fight, and I think India has done absolutely the right thing in terms of COVID diplomacy.
For the benefit of our viewers, Ambassador Kumar, tell us about the implications of COVID-19 actions being undertaken under the SAARC framework, because everything moves with consensus. Then you need consensus as far as building the agenda is concerned, or even an outcome document. So is there a flip side to all of this, which Pakistan perhaps needs to understand?
No, look, it's like this. SAARC is based on two things. One, you need to keep bilateral political disputes out of its ambit. And this is something that the SAARC founders understood very well, because if you do that, then you bring into, and it's not just 2 or 3 countries. We could have differences with other countries as well. And that would completely poison the atmosphere. The second thing about SAARC is that, yes, you need a consensus, but my interpretation of SAARC is that you need a consensus to have a SAARC summit of leaders. Nothing prevents SAARC from actually focusing on publicly funded programs for the survival of the region. And I think it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 countries don't participate. I think we should go ahead, allow countries which want to cooperate. And I'm not talking of summit level meetings and so on, but if people want to focus on public health, if people want to focus on combating a regional scourge like coronavirus, I think the SAARC should be able to allow that. And this will be an important test of that. But more importantly, Pakistan has not boycotted it as such. They are merely saying that we are contributing, but our contribution is conditional. My reaction to that would be, so be it. It's fine. I think other countries will understand that if there is a country which is contributing on the basis of some conditions, so be it. But that shouldn't prevent other countries from going forward and cooperating for the well-being of the region.
And qualitatively, Ambassador Kumar, how do you look at the suggestions that Prime Minister had made during the SAARC video conference? He said that there should be a common research platform which would coordinate research action by various countries. Besides that, he spoke about pooling in best practices of various countries. He, of course, did propose that emergency response fund, wherein India made an initial commitment of $10 million, the highest if you compare with the other 7 countries as well. And then PM said that India would have on standby a team of specialists and doctors with all the required equipments at the disposal of all the partner countries. And these are just few of the many suggestions that he had made.
I think, again, I have to say the Prime Minister has done this with a very far-sighted vision. SAARC, as I said honestly, has been moribund. I really think that if there are those of us who are well-wishers of SAARC, this opportunity should be grabbed by SAARC with both its hands. SAARC is ideally suited to face regional disaster scenarios. It may not be the most productive organization when it comes to trade, investment, and so on. And so be it. That's fine. But we know that this region suffers from floods. This region has a human development index which is not the best. This region has other diseases, communicable, non-communicable diseases. And now, of course, we have this enormous scourge called coronavirus. So my way of looking at it would be that if SAARC can make use of this opportunity to reinvent itself, and even if it can devote itself to bringing the region together when there is a disaster staring you in the face, I think it would have served a purpose. So that is the way I interpret the Prime Minister's proposals. I mean, pooling of scientific resources. If there is an invention, if there is a vaccine that is going to be invented in India, hypothetically, obviously we will make it available for the region. That is the minimum that one can expect from SAARC. And maybe there are other countries which can contribute in other ways. So I really believe, quite apart from the intrinsic merit of the Prime Minister's proposal, if I was a SAARC enthusiast, in fact, if I was a member of the SAARC Secretariat, I would grab this proposal with both my hands and say, hey, this is a wonderful opportunity to reinvent SAARC, to give it momentum, and to really get it going, because we've had trouble doing that precisely in the past.
Absolutely, Ambassador Kumar, and all this should be a step in the direction of the goal that you cited of India becoming the regional healthcare provider. Thank you so much, Ambassador Kumar, for speaking to us on Newsnight. Well, let's move on now. A meeting of the empowered group of officers to tackle the challenges emerging as a result of spread of COVID-19 was held on Friday under the chairmanship of Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. The meeting was the latest in a series of periodic reviews at various levels by Prime Minister's office to monitor the ongoing efforts to counter the impact of the pandemic. Here's what happened. Well, the issues that were discussed were related to supply chain and logistics management for availability of necessary items. Besides that, efforts undertaken for the benefit of stakeholders involved were also discussed. Steps to assist farmers to harvest their produce while maintaining social distancing was also taken up. For the confidence-building measures that are necessary, and the need to ensure percolation of guidelines of the Ministry of Home Affairs to the ground level. Besides that, all chief secretaries of states were issued instructions to arrange for shelter for vulnerable groups like migrants and homeless. The centre is in constant touch with states, and district level monitoring is being undertaken. The production of PPEs is being ramped up. Capacity building for healthcare personnel is being ensured, and NGOs and civil society groups are also being mobilized. Progressive rollout of welfare measures through economic relief package under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana was also reviewed. Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister underlined that data sanctity was important to ensure that benefits reach all the intended beneficiaries. And steps taken to ensure a timely information dissemination throughout the country were also discussed. So these were the highlights of the review meeting that happened of the Prime Minister's office with 11 empowered groups of officers.